Hello and greetings everyone to the first of hopefully many challenge runs. This time we're starting with Final Fantasy X-2 with Can We Beat the Game as a Beastmaster challenge. In this challenge, I'll be taking one of the girls, in this case Pain, and making them a Beastmaster, and the rest of the party will be taken up by monsters from the Creature Creator program, which was added in the re-release. And there's two things that will cause this to be a challenge. The first being that I have no direct control over the monsters in combat and they will act on their own volition, even if their attacks will cause the enemy to heal. The second thing that will cause things to be more challenging is limitations opposed to how creatures can learn abilities and how many abilities they can have at one given. Creatures are only able to have 4 learned attacks and 4 learned passives at any one given moment, with the only way to go over this limit is through gear and what the creature is currently wearing. Every dress sphere grid, dress sphere, and piece of equipment is able to grant creatures attacks, stats, and passive abilities, depending on what the piece of gear is. Accessories will grant creatures the same bonuses as Riku, Yuna, and Pain, but dress spheres and dress sphere grids will provide a fixed bonus to the creatures that will actually be different than what Riku, Yuna, and Pain would be provided. The other methods for creatures learning abilities and attacks I will go over when they become relevant in the challenge run. Normally you're not able to start off with the Beastmaster class, but thanks to the Farplane mod, I will be able to start off with it right away in my inventory. And I just want to let you know before this run gets started that this entire run was streamed live on twitch.tv on my channel, Zealotjohn. And with that explanation out of the way, we will get started by skipping the intro because we can't use the job at that time. And now once we're on the Celsius, we'll get started with catching our creatures. I end up going with a white elemental that I named Magemental, and Sahagin, I don't know how to say it right, Sahagin, that I don't give a nickname for some reason. With the party decided, I give Sahagin the Thief class so he can move fast and steal for me, and Magemental the Trainer class so he gets half MP cost. And now that we get started at Mount Gagazet, we get the yellow ring so we can give it to Magemental, and that will allow him to use Thunder and have Thunder Ward for his own protection. And then we run into LeBlanc's crew, which we make quick work of them, which starts the race, which from there we get the red ring. We then give the red ring to Magemental so it can now use Fire and have Fire Ward. Then once we make it to the top, we then go and fight Boris, take care of him, and now we have the Black Mage Dress Sphere. And that provides Magemental Terrible Black Magic and MP Absorb, so we'll never run out of mana. Now that we're back on the Celsius, the missions now open up and I can pick where we go. And I choose to help Waka. And once we land, we get into a fight, which I learn Poison Flurry. Which reminds me, Pain learns skills, and that I can actually choose what skill to learn next. So I decide to learn HP Stroll so I can make things a little bit easier on myself. While strolling around, I get the 4 numbers to access the cave, which then we can go inside and fight the dragon. After defeating the dragon, I get the Protection Halo, which I equip to Magemental so he can now cast Asuna. The next thing I do is go help out Tobly, so I can just gain some more experience. The only real update is that I finished learning MP Stroll, and then we go visit Kamari, who's going through some more trouble with the Ronso, and then we answer the first part of his questions 3. And now we're finally at a part where I actually use another method to teach a monster a skill. We are actually able to teach a new skill by feeding it either gear or use items. This method also lets you permanently increase their stats. So by doing this, I teach Magemental life and give it 1 more max HP by feeding it Phoenix Downs. Next we go to Xanarkand, where Magemental learns auto regen from being healed. As the third and final method of how a monster can learn a skill, when a monster is of a certain level and is hit by a certain type of ability, they will have a % chance of getting a skill that they can naturally learn. Now that we have auto life, we go confront Sid, tell him that what he's doing is wrong with turning this place into an attraction. Shortly after, we go then fight the Guardian Beast. It does not put up much of a fight, but we are still only in the first chapter. Speaking of the first chapter, we then go to Kilika to finish things off. We then get all the questions right so we can get past the guards without any extra fights. And then I fight the chapter boss, and what happens just kind of amazed me.
What? Oh my god, what?
And now that the chapter 1 boss has been defeated by bird flying, we go to the final cutscene where it just greens out for some reason. Luckily it doesn't freeze so we can keep going from here. As then it greens out a second time, but same deal. So we're on to chapter 2. Now that I'm in chapter 2, I would return the orb to the Youth League that we got from the end of chapter 1 after defeating the boss. Not much happened, so we go on to the next plot point, where we discover that LeBlanc has robbed us. So now we have to go steal uniforms. The first one we get is at the top of Mount Gagazet, where we find Ormy. We do a quick fight with him, get the outfit. After we get a job digging in a desert, we end up finding Logos at an oasis. And then one moderately longer fight with him, we end up beating him and getting our second outfit. Before grabbing the last outfit, which would force us into the next mission, I go take care of the Ochu infestation so that we can get the Shining Bracelet. The Shining Bracelet provides auto protect, so I equip that to Sahagin right away. I go get the Final Disguise, but on the way I find a useless dress sphere, and then Ormy shows up. We break into a fight against Ormy and 2 goons, which make quick work of as well, which then gives us access to LeBlanc's lair. While I'm in the lair, we actually experience the first death. Luckily, Mage Mental's able to bring me back to life thanks to it learning life earlier, and we're able to actually win this fight. As a prize for winning, I'm given a broken orb, so we watch it. It is very green, so this definitely means we have to go to Bavel and infiltrate the temple. In Bavel, we actually have 3 bosses we're going to have to go through. The first one being the Precepts Guard, which we end up defeating pretty easily. And then next we end up fighting Barreleye, who actually gives us some trouble by getting rid of Mage Mental's mana and a flank stop to him. But once Mage Mental has recovered, he goes down fairly easy from there. And then we go to Bahamut, who, even though is the final chapter boss of Chapter 2, ends up being easier than Barreleye. And that ends up wrapping up Chapter 2, which now leads us into Chapter 3. So we start by going to help Waka, who's trying to prevent the temple from being burnt down by stopping the Aeon inside. And immediately after finding Waka, the very next fight, Sahagin ends up learning Wataka. Hopefully Wataka ends up being helpful for us. Eventually we make it to Valfiord, and we end up defeating that no problem as well. I may have to rethink the rules for these challenges if I keep doing Final Fantasy X-2 some more. And before we continue the main story, I decided to start doing some side quests. So we go to Lake Macalania. Here you have to win 6 consecutive fights without being able to recover between fights. And once you complete this, you get the Pride of the Sword Dress Sphere grid and the Berserker Dress Sphere. Then I go and fight Yojimbo, which surprisingly he ends up putting a good enough challenge that we actually wipe and get our first game over. So on the rematch, I'm ready for when Zanmoto happens so I can recover and beat him without much more issue. And now for the last side quest where I'd go talk to Kamari to deal with the young Ronsos. He tells us to go up Mount Gagazet, and on the way up, Mage Mental learns Ribbon. So that's going to be a really big help for me. Then I make it to the top, deal with the young Ronsos, and that's it for the available side quests for right now. Back on the main story, return to Kilika, where we use Donna to sneak past some guards. Only to then immediately get blown up and receive another game over. So this guy's on the list of things to avoid. Once inside the temple, I get the Samurai Dress figure, and then I remember I need to manage my gear. I should not be this far in and finally remember to actually update that stuff. Now that everyone's gear is updated, we go fight Ifrit, who is weaker than the random encounter, and we defeat fairly easily. Next we go to Doze Temple, where we run into a tomb, who uses Stone Breath and gets 2 out of 3 of us. Hopefully Ribbon would have saved us, but then he just murders Mage Mental. After getting everyone Stone Ward through gear, we're able to make it to Ixion, who we defeat fairly easily like the other Aeons. And in the final cutscene for Chapter 3, it actually doesn't turn green. We actually get the full cutscene. So that's progress. Now it's on to Chapter 4, where we have to go find Tobli to put on a concert. On the way to find Tobli, we not just witnessed one attempted hit and run, but a second one as well. Once we are able to get to Tobli, he gives us the Black Tabard Dress Sphere grid, and it'll help us put on the concert. I check on the Black Tabard Dress Sphere grid to see what it does, and it provides Turbo Black Magic and Flare just for having that equipped. So I end up putting that on Mage Mental for the rest of the run. We're almost ready for the concert, but we have to take care of this dragon that's immune to all magic, including Flare. Sahagin and Pain are eventually able to take him down, and then we can have the concert. And surprisingly, the concert's not green. So that's another one that actually works. And since we had the concert, that's the end of Chapter 4. This is a really short chapter that gives a really strong piece of gear. Might have to rethink the rules for future runs to not allow the Black Tabard. At the start of Chapter 5, we have to go down an Aeon hole to get to the center of the earth to fight Vegnagon. So I go down the Doze Temple hole. Each hole has a different obstacle, which this one is a bunch of fire geysers. We run into the first boss of this chapter, which is Shiva. And here we start seeing the power of Flare from Mage Mental. Yeah, we definitely need to not use this in the future runs. Then next up is the Magus Sisters. Mega Sisters? That's one of the two. This fight ends up taking a good long time because they seem to get priority over my own actions for a majority of the fight. And when they get their signature move off, I almost lose, but I'm able to recover and eventually win the fight. Next we run into Enema, who ends up being easier than Shiva, so he just gets damaged down very quickly. And now we make it to the final dungeon, the Piano Dungeon, where we have to learn what song to play in order to get past an unbeatable boss, which is at every gate. And the random encounters here are not any joke. Like this dragon, which is essentially a copy of the Magic Immune Dragon, which this takes me a while to kill every time it shows up. And then we make it to Vegnagun. And this multiple boss, multi-stage boss gauntlet. Start off with fighting the tail. It's able to kill Mage Mental, but we're able to kill it quickly afterwards. Then we go fight Vegnagun's nodes, and that one's actually even easier to kill, so that one's taken care of. Then I get to his chest core, and that one's also easy to deal with. Vegnagun's very easy compared to some of the other bosses, especially for the final boss of the game. We then get to the head, where Mage Mental finally decides to start spamming Flare and Firaga, which really whittles him down quickly. And then we get to Shuyin, who kills Pain, but then he ends up getting taken down by the two monsters after they bring Pain back to life. This one was basically a victory lap for the two monsters. And that's the run. Not too much of a challenge overall, as aside from a few bumps, ended up being pretty easy to actually get through. I will be definitely banning Black Tabar from future runs, as easy access to Flare just breaks the ending way too easily. Hopefully the next run just isn't so dull.